The first type of call we're going to look at is the call that you're going to make to an active candidate. And the first thing we need to do is think about things from the candidate's perspective. The reason it's important to think about it from a candidate's perspective is actually it's their feeling that we should care about most. We know what we want from them, but unless we can give them the feeling that they want from the call that they have with us, it's unlikely they're going to give us what we need. So what we need to prepare is, why is that candidate relevant for our opportunity? What do we know about that candidate's background, whether the company they work for, or do we have a shared connection that can immediately elevate us from just the general sort of body of recruiters to someone that they think they might actually want to build a relationship with? You then need to think about, how are you going to build credibility by presenting that opportunity that isn't going to make you look like a salesperson that's only interested in serving themselves. And credibility is really focused on you demonstrating what you've got actually matches their needs. So I'd encourage you to suspend judgment on why your job is perfect and why that role is better than any they've ever heard of, until you've actually spoken to the candidate and start sounding a little bit considered. The third stage of that call, to get trust of the candidate, is to give them questions that allow them to make choices as to whether they want to continue or not. If you don't give them that choice, they'll think they're being railroaded by a salesperson. What you've got to believe is that you've done a good enough job of promoting that job and matching it to the candidate's needs in order for them to be interested on its own merits rather than you closing them. If you go to any recruitment office, there's always calls at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night where candidates are withdrawing from sales processes and they're withdrawing from interview processes because they've been pushed into a situation that they don't feel they can get out of. And the last stage is influence. And influence is about trying to give the candidate new information to help them make a new decision. So they may well have said they want £30,000 for this location, for this role. And what you're doing through the influence stage, assuming you've built a good relationship, is ask them where they would stretch and flex. If it had 2 out of 3, would that be enough for them to consider this opportunity? Again, remember that when you're approaching this call to the candidate and you're looking for a decision from the candidate, it's really important that you go quiet and you give them the opportunity to make the decision themselves. So the next type of first call to a candidate we're going to talk about is, how do you approach a passive candidate? Now, when we're thinking about things from the candidate's perspective, the passive candidate isn't waiting for your call. In fact, you're more likely than not to interrupt what they're actually doing. They may well not have considered the fact they're looking for a job, and they may almost certainly not have an updated CV. And so the mistake many recruiters make is they approach calls to passive candidates. So this might be candidates that are existing on your database, or candidates that are referrals or recommendations, or maybe even candidates you approach on LinkedIn. They approach it in the same way as they do an active candidate. And what that does, it assumes that they're looking for a job, and it makes candidates feel that you're really not listening to what they want, and actually they're just the same as everybody else. So the tweak for the passive call is just to play a little bit cooler and just to take things a little bit slower to allow candidates to get their mind around the fact that you're encouraging them to be looking for a new opportunity. So the first part of the planning phase of the call is, it's important you try and understand about their organisation they're working in at the moment, the skills that they're demonstrating in the role that they're doing, and think about what the next step might be. If you've got connections in common, think about how you might bring those into the call. And if you know someone in the organisation, see how you can bring that in too. The more you're able to approach that call that demonstrates yourself as someone that's competent in your market and knowledgeable in your market, the more likely they are to actually listen to what you've got to say. So let's talk about how we open the call. So the first step of the call is we're looking to build confidence of the candidate. And so in this stage, in the opening of the call, what you're going to be doing is just reminding the candidate that A, you're not looking for an immediate decision, but also remind them that you have put some thought into the call. So the start of the call might go like this. Hi Sam, it's Alex Moyle here, and I'm calling from DB Consulting. The reason for the call is I notice you're working at Unum at the moment, and I understand that in your e-learning capacity, you've been doing that for 2 or 3 years, and I was ringing just to understand what your next step of your career would be. What you get from that opening is the fact I'm really just trying to engage Sam in a conversation, because really before I can talk about my opportunity, what I need to be able to do is find out more about him. Another way of maybe doing that is just going, "Hi Sam, how you doing? It's Alex Moyle from DB Consulting. I appreciate you may well not be looking for a role at the moment, and I wouldn't be assumptive enough to say I've got a role that would be good for you. Would you have 3 or 4 minutes to talk in more depth about where you're at with your career and what your next career move might be?" And so what we're looking to do in that example is really, again, assume with the candidate that they're not looking and allow them the opportunity to engage us in a conversation. What you may find is the candidate says, "I can't talk now, but could we talk later?" And that would definitely be a good sign that the candidate's wanting to talk. So think about that opening line that's going to demonstrate shared connections and a shared credibility that says you know what you're talking about. So when you open the call up a little bit and you're trying to build credibility, make sure you're asking lots of questions to the candidate about what they're looking for from their next role. What skills would they look to develop? What type of organisation would they like to be in? Is there any external influences outside of work in family or social life that might indicate what they want to do in their next role? Only at this point can you then present an opportunity. And the really important thing when you're presenting an opportunity is you match the opportunity with the things they've just told you, which demonstrates I have the ability to listen, process information, and then give you what you want. When it comes to building trust in this call, what you've got to do is ask some really open questions that gives the candidate an opportunity to back out. So that might be, "So Sam, how does this sound so far? Sam, how active are you on the job market at the moment? Sam, what would you like the next step from this conversation to be?" And by asking these open questions, you're putting the power in the hands of the candidate. And by them feeling like they've got the power, they're much more likely to be open to an ongoing conversation. Because remember that calls to passive candidates are unlikely to yield someone looking right there and then to go forward to a job tomorrow. And whilst it may happen, it's unlikely that you're going to get the sense of urgency that you need. When it comes to influencing stage, the most important thing to remember is about flexibility. Is you're not trying to get this person to start a job tomorrow. So you can afford to ask more open questions around, "Well, Sam, if I had a job that was more local with a company that wasn't as sexy as the one you're working for at the moment, how would that sound? If I had a job that was closer to home but didn't pay as much money, how would you feel about that opportunity?" Because what you're looking to do is really understanding what you should call them with and when you should call it. You're not looking for definitive answers, you're looking for how they would feel in those situations. Hopefully this gives you a good understanding of how a passive call is slightly different from an active candidate call. But both these calls are really important to master if you're going to be successful as a resourcer and a recruiter of candidates.